This is huge. I mean, people to this day look at this and say, this is Jesus, this is our Lord, this is what he went through. To say, no, sorry, it's a very clever forgery, that's painful.
In medieval Europe, there was a lucrative trade in creating religious relics. People were willing to pay to get close to Jesus, and forgers were prepared to take advantage. But despite being revealed as a fake, fascination with the shroud intensified.
How did that image get on the shroud? Nobody could explain that. There's still all kinds of theories out there that we need to test.
But South African art historian Professor Nicholas Allen thinks he knows the answer. He believes it's the world's earliest surviving photograph.
I looked at the shroud and I said, how were you made? And the shroud tells us that it is acting like a negative photograph. I'm quite aware that that might sound like a crazy idea to think that somebody was able to make a photograph 600 years ago. But when I started to look at the technology that was available at that time, I realized they had everything already.
From his study of art history, Allen knew that medieval artists already used an optical device called a camera obscura.
Camera obscura works exactly like a human eye. What we have here is a box which is sealed. No light can enter into it except through this big hole over here. Like a human eye, there is a lens. Whatever is outside this box is focused through this lens and forms an image on the back wall of the camera, but it's inverted. In other words, it's upside down.
The lens at the front of the camera ensures a sharp image is projected on the back wall.
We know for a fact this is very ancient technology, so there's no doubt that this technology was available in the late 13th and early 14th century, exactly when it would have been needed to make something like the Shroud of Turin.
Allen positions a model in front of his camera obscura and faces it to the sun.
So the whole setup has to be calculated very, very carefully before you can start the exposure.
A medieval artist would need to ensure that any image projected on a sheet could be permanently fixed. The sheet would be soaked with photographic chemicals. Today, this means using silver salts.
Now, both silver nitrate and silver sulfate have been around in Europe from at least the 13th century, and it's very easy to make.
A sheet is soaked in silver sulfate solution. Dried, and then mounted in the camera.
After 8 hours exposure, you will notice a discoloration on the linen, and that discoloration would be a negative image of what was outside the camera.
The silver sulfate would have been washed out of the cloth to complete the process using a chemical in plentiful supply.
To remove silver sulfate from a piece of linen, one can use urine, since urine contains levels of ammonia. Whoever made the Shroud of Turin didn't do this on their first attempt. This probably took a lot of organizing, a lot of planning, and a lot of trial and error before they got it right.
When the image is analyzed, Allen's method is shown to produce astonishing results.
The resultant image has all the characteristics of the image that is found on the Shroud of Turin. And those are that it is negative, there are no dyes, pigment stains, or powders. Here we have an image that has been produced after 3 days using the camera obscura. To turn this into the Shroud of Turin image, we would have to add blood to it. You would simply take a paintbrush and you would artistically paint your stigmata onto the image. In my opinion, this is the oldest example we have of a phenomenon that we now call photography, and it dates back to medieval times.
But Allen's work has divided opinion and left even more questions unanswered.
If it is a medieval photograph, then where are all the other medieval photographs? That's the other problem of the shroud. It's unique. There is nothing else like it.
And there are some who, despite the carbon dating, continue to believe in its authenticity.
Some people refuse to believe the result. They question the samples that were taken. They weren't taken from the very center of the shroud. They were taken from the edge of the shroud.
And recent work on another mysterious relic has introduced new doubts into our understanding of the Turin shroud. It's an artifact that may suggest the shroud is far older than claimed. In a small annex of a cathedral in northern Spain is the cloth believed to have covered Jesus' face after he died on the cross. The Sudarium of Oviedo.
What we are looking at in front of us are bloodstains of Jesus of Nazareth. This is his actual blood in front of us.
Mark Guskin and a team from the Spanish Center of Syndenology have been studying the Sudarium of Oviedo for over 25 years. Legend says that this was another separate cloth also mentioned in the Bible. And he saw the linen wrappings lying there, and the cloth that had been on Jesus' head.
We've taken this cloth into the laboratory, analysed what the stains are made of, and most of them are 1 part blood and 6 parts pleural edema fluid, which is a liquid that collects in the lungs when somebody dies of asphyxiation.
Scholars believe that most victims of crucifixion would have died of suffocation, and the fluids associated with this would be left in the lungs. Guskin's studies appear to shine new light into a part of the Jesus story that was previously unknown, using a near-perfect replica of the cloth.
Now, what these experiments showed us is that, first of all, the cloth was placed on a dead body, because all the blood stains coming out are absolutely incompatible with any kind of breathing movement.
If Guskin is correct, then Joseph of Arimathea would have wrapped this cloth around Jesus' face while he was still on the cross.
The face cloth was used in Jewish burial customs because the face is really the seat of the soul. When that person dies, the face is the first thing that is covered. It must be treated with the greatest respect.
The reason Joseph became proactive in making sure Jesus had a proper, honorable burial, I think this was Joseph's own way of saying, I did not do what I should have done. I should have spoken on your behalf.
Guskin believes that marks on the Sudarium where the forehead would have been help explain how Joseph removed the body from the cross.
The only way that we could reproduce these was if the body was lying face down on the ground, so that all of this liquid and blood trickling out of the nose would move down onto the forehead. But then the body was carried face down for between 5 to 10 minutes while somebody was holding the cloth to the face.
In the tomb, the Sudarium would have been removed, and Jesus then wrapped in the shroud.
So this teaches us what happened between the death of Christ and when the body was laid in the tomb.
But Guskin believes that there's an even more important reason to study the Sudarium. For him, the stains on the cloth are like a fingerprint, unique to one person.
if this cloth was wrapped round the head of another person who had maybe even suffered the same kind of torture and wounds, then the stains would have a different shape and a different format.
For Guskin, this was to prove critical, because when the team compared these bloodstains on the sudarium with those on the shroud, they made an extraordinary discovery. The bloodstains appeared to match.
So we can conclude that the two cloths were used at the same time for the same event to cover the same body.
Carbon testing of the cloth has not delivered any clear results, but the first written record of the relic tied it to Jerusalem just over 500 years after Jesus' death. For Guskin, these records suggest it is at least 700 years older than the shroud. How could that be? Guskin believes the dating of the shroud must be wrong.
Now that is an incredible conclusion, because they could only have coincided in Jerusalem sometime before the 5th century, which says an awful lot about the dating of the Shroud of Turin and how it does not date from the medieval times, and is in fact a much earlier cloth.
Despite decades of scientific scrutiny, for many, the mystery and power of the Shroud of Turin still remains.
I do think it would be possible for the shroud that wrapped Jesus to survive until now. Clearly, it would have been an important artifact for the disciples and then for the early Christians, and so the notion that it would have been preserved makes total sense to me. My gut tells me that it's real.
It doesn't seem likely to me that it's real, but the Turin Shroud focuses our attention on something unavoidable about the Jesus story, which is how much he suffers. Jesus may be glorious, enthroned in heaven, Lord of Lords, King of Kings, but this moment of suffering and pain is etched into the Turin Shroud. It's his most human moment.
For many, the shroud is also a poignant reminder of a man trying to do the right thing.
I think a part of Joseph's story is our story. Even though he didn't understand the outcome, even though he didn't understand how the story was going to play out, what he knew was being on the side of Jesus, was being a part of God's story in human history.